Many of us are really struggling, and that's why the suicide rate for survivors is so high, and divorce rates. All of my values were turned upside down. I turned inwards. It affects all aspects of life, and when I say all, I mean all aspects of life.
I know that you are presently helping people who have had near-death experiences as a counselor, and I would like to know why you are doing this and what exactly you do with these people.
First off, how do I help them? Why did I help them? I couldn't find any help. After my own cardiac arrest that night, I was asked to come back to give a talk at the hospital that saved my life. I was being interviewed by a gentleman who knows an awful lot about NDE survivors, and his name is called Professor Ken Spearpoint. He interviewed me for the National Health Service. The purpose of having me there was for the litigious side of resuscitating somebody. And they just wanted to hear my perspective of what did I feel about being resuscitated? How has it affected me up to that point when they asked me to come back to give the interview. I gave the interview. It was a full house. It went down exceptionally well. I learned an awful lot about the legal sides of the concerns that doctors and nurses have, and hospital trust about resuscitating us. And so right at the end of the interview, a paramedic came up to me and he said, you would make a fantastic counsellor. He said, have you thought about it? And at the time, AJ, I was just recovering. I think I was about 1.5 years into post cardiac arrest. And I said, well, yeah, anyway, it just so happened that he had the local newspaper that was advertising, if you want to train to be a fully qualified counsellor, recognised that, this is what you want to do. So I took the information off him and I started my course. But in the meantime, I was seeing other psychiatrists, other counsellors, other psychotherapists, and to be quite honest, it was a disaster. It was a complete disaster. People were operating outside of their field of experience. The counter-transference that was being put upon me, some were saying, did I sit at the hand of God? These are psychiatrists, did you sit at the hand of God? What was it like? Was it painful? There was nothing in relation to, really where I was at, and because I don't know whether you know this, but even if you just have a heart attack, the medical profession will say it will take 4 years for the brain to get back together again. So that's just a heart attack, let alone a cardiac arrest where you have, oxygen starvation. The drugs will often send people into bouts of psychosis, which is another problem about being diagnosed by other professionals. It's that spiritual side. There's that slant to it. It fractures your whole life. So, I had some disastrous experiences with counsellors and, mental health professionals. Total car crashes. Some I've still not got over. I still carry those themes of what was said to me. So the most glib things. Oh, you'll be okay in 1 year. And I listened to a doctor. And I thought, oh wow, fantastic. I'll be all right. There is a way out. 1 year came and went. No. Nobody told me of the grief of losing yourself. Nobody told me of the grief and the loss of losing occupation. I had a business. I had a business that was going somewhere. I was a mechanical heating engineer, and I was enjoying life, but all of a sudden with oxygen starvation, bang, gone. So, we're not told about this. So that is really, it was the paramedic at the talk who set me off to helping people. How do I help others? Well, I help them on a one-to-one basis. Those who want to contact me, it can be all realms. You may have had a stroke. It's altered you. Some people would consider that as a near death. Some would have cardiac arrests, but who do we go to, AJ? Who do we go to? Somebody who has experienced this, but is all qualified in some of the working methodologies from a psychoanalytical viewpoint. Who? There's nothing written for us, there's only critiques, there's not this for them, there's not that for them. But how do we, it's like, so I took on board, I flipped the whole role. I thought, okay, Ray, what did you want to find from your counsellor psychiatrist? How could they have helped you? And so my experiences are now based on what would I say to another Raymond O'Brien who comes and sits in front of me or who contacts me. It's got to be something of value. It can't be something glib of you'll be okay in 1 year. You know, nobody mentions about the fracturing of the soul, the loss of connection to self. What does that do to your partner? What does that do to your family? You know, this is why I went into 5 years isolation. You know, I remember speaking to my sister, and she, you know, it takes her a long time to be brave about her thoughts about, I don't know my brother anymore. You know, just to imagine saying that, you know, it's a very difficult thing when already your brother doesn't even know who he is. He's still trying to rebuild his own brain, trying to understand what society expects, what is society about. All of my values were turned upside down. How can I say? I turned inwards. I turned inwards to my own intellect, intuition.
Can you remember some of these near-death experiencers that you treated, their stories more or less, how you helped them, and if their NDEs were similar or different from yours?
I'll pick one out. We'll call him Peter. I had a life-saving operation back in 2020, and I was just about to be discharged, and one of the doctors said to me, he said, we're going to send you home. We're just going to do a quick echocardiogram and a scan of your heart, and then we'll see, you know, whether we can let you home or not. So, okay. He said, what do you do for a living? So I told him, like, you know, I told him about my experience and what I do for a living. And he disappeared, but he came back about 5 minutes later. And he said, just before you go, would you mind seeing a patient here in the hospital? And I said, yes. I said, but I'll see them as a survivor, not as a counsellor. And okay, I said, what's the problem? He said, this patient has had a cardiac arrest, very traumatic resuscitation, ending in a tracheotomy with a cut into the throat. And so I wondered if you could just take a little bit of time. He said, the patient has been diagnosed by our in-house psychiatrist, and the diagnosis is psychosis. He said, but we don't believe it's psychosis. You know, so, you know, because you're here, we're wondering whether or not, you know, we know, because I'm quite well known at this hospital, because we know you and trust you, we were wondering if you'd sit with the patient. I said, yeah, of course. So I sat with the patient. They brought the patient in. The patient sat next to me. I started asking him his story. The patient said he didn't remember. All he remembers is being out shopping, and the next thing, he's having these dreams, you know, and he finds himself waking up in the ICU unit. So I asked him, what was his story? You know, why is he so fearsome and frightened about it? And he's told me that his grandfather used to be an RAF Lancaster bomber pilot, and he's found in his death experience that he was sitting next to his grandfather on the flight deck. And he was a younger man, and he was the same age as his grandfather, sitting in the pilot seat to his left. And he said, Ray, I've sat and I've looked at him. And he said, the next thing I know is that I've taken a knife out and I stabbed him in the neck. So to his neck, where they'd done the tracheotomy. Yeah, right. So you know, straight away, it's like making that link, like, you know, it's like bang. And I said, what did the psychiatrist say? He said, I was suffering from the drugs that they gave me to keep me alive. And they are very, very, very powerful drugs. So, and it has been known to put people into comas, you know, because of once they wake them up, they're still suffering severe cases of psychosis, bang, put them back to sleep again. So it's a common factor, this is apparently. So I'm sitting there with this man, and a member of staff comes in, opens up the door, walks into the room, who actually resuscitated this patient, was there that night on the resuscitation, and had came in, like, you know, to have a chat with him. Beautiful person. This medical professional person was a beautiful person, but he was, if this person was here now, he'd be going, you're right, Raymond, because we spoke about it later on. So so all three of us are sitting there. He was surprised to see me, because we're good friends. I've known him for 13 years, 14 years. Right, you know, he works at the cardiac unit. So he comes in, he's surprised to see me. He's got a little leaflet in his hand, which he'd been given to him by some other counselling service, and he's about to give this leaflet to the person, the patient who's sitting next to me. So I've looked at the leaflet and I thought, that's not going to help him. That is actually what the direction you're going to send him in is actually going to make him worse. So I thought, let's learn something here, Raymond. Let's learn. So the patient sitting next to me, he's just holding on to his emotions, just holding on by his fingernails. Now, the person who's come in has a medical power. You know, that imbalance that you get between the medical profession and the patient, like, you know. So I could see the subservience in the patient as he's listening to the medical profession, the professional. The professional's telling him, and this is what I couldn't believe I was hearing it. You'll be all right, he said. You'll be all right in a few months. And something inside of me just went click. And I remember the tone of my voice was raised. And I actually looked at the medical professional. I said, what if he's not okay in a couple of months? Do you think he's going to forget what you've just said to him? How do you think that will impact him? Do you think that's going to make him feel joyous that, you know, you as a medical professional have told him, and you've resuscitated a lot of people? What if he doesn't make it? You know, who's he going to turn to? So I was really stunned at this, and he kind of listened, but then what he proceeded to tell the patient is how he reacted when he was being resuscitated. The medical professional explained to the patient who survived his death experience, yeah, we were all over you. He said, we were pounding your chest. We put drugs into you. He said, the sweat was dripping off you. He said, but we could see that you had the will to fight. And at that moment, AJ, I've looked at the patient and the tears are just rolling down his face. And it was like he'd been cut free and set adrift in a sea of torrid emotions. And I was fuming. I was absolutely fuming. And I told the medical professional, so I've known you for a long time. You know, you are operating outside of your field of experience. I know lives, you helped save mine, but you are not helping this person here. I've been on the other end of what you have just done, and you have no comprehension of the damage that what you have just laid, the foundation that you have laid for this survivor is like failure. That's what you've done to him. And he was shocked, but you know what? The credit to this guy, he spoke to me towards the end of the day and he said, can we meet for coffee the next day? I met him for coffee the next day and he told me he didn't get to sleep till 3 o'clock in the morning because of what I said to him. So this is what I do. This is what you'll only get from a survivor. You know that true empathic understanding of been there, seen it, done it, and it really hurts. You know, so you know I've had so innumerable people have come to me. You know those who are close to death. You know, so I spent 18 months on a cancer unit helping those who were close to death, and the only reason why I was there is because it was the same hospital that saved my life, and they asked me, you're well known here because of your survivor, because of how you survived, would you come and work on the cancer unit to help those who are close to death? And I spoke to so many people they gave me the little room in a chapel that was on the chemotherapy unit. And people used to come in, we'd talk about, you know, what to expect. One woman said to me, I'll never forget her, she's gone now. And we came out of the consultant's room. I heard the consultant say to her, you should go home, label everything you want to give to your family and start making peace with everyone. And she came out, her husband couldn't be with her. He was upstairs having coffee. He was just too devastated about the whole thing. So this is the kind of work that I do. We came out of the consulting room and there was a great big long corridor in the hospital. She was to my left, very frail by this time. She looked up at me and she went, Raymond, can I drive in heaven? And she said, because I know you've been there. I'd never been asked that question, you know, so it was another learning curve. I looked at her and I said, I can say her name. I said, Tracy, you don't need to drive in heaven, like, you know, that's all I can tell you. Everything else, you get your wings and then that'll be you. And it's this kind of things which they don't teach you. It's only what you pick up. So there's an awful lot of that. I use an awful lot of the working methodologies, psychodynamic, CBT, transactional, PCT. So all of this, makes the whole. So that's how I apply that. But I apply that with my perspective of what I have experienced. What is it like sitting in front of a professor of cardiology who's even mystified himself of how are you still here? To hear that is what I also put onto other patients. It's the incredulity of it all, of surviving this. It's like I may look all right, but that's not who I am. So I still struggle. Many of us can't struggle being in society. Many don't know this after our event. Many commit suicide because it's just too much to comprehend, So and on top of that, we are now at odds with most of society. Most of us who've had this experience, it has altered our fear of death, which again, death is a driver of life, and all of a sudden, when you start losing that, it alters your perception and it makes you become noticeable to others. So you start sticking out, because of your attitude. So again, this is the kind of thing that I try to get across as much. So if I give talks, I gave a talk to the Whitechapel Teaching Hospital here in London, and that's a very famous, world famous teaching hospital. And most in there, when I gave the talk, just never even thought about it. They just think you should be happy. You should be, really, hey, I'm over the moon. I survived. But many of us are not like that. Many of us are really struggling. And that's why the suicide rate for survivors is so high, and divorce rates. That's another thing to look at. So it affects all aspects of life, and when I say all, I mean all aspects of life. You don't walk around with this kind of experience and not be marked by it, not be striped by it. So yes, it's a profound thing to put to others, and this is why I get so angry when I hear of other mental health professionals who feel that they have the experience to deal with the depth of pain, lack of understanding. It highlights of how we are conditioned from school, from kindergarten, when people say, heaven and all of this stuff. If you're not good, I actually came back with a guilt complex, a survivor's guilt. And I'm still trying to cope with that, and again, they don't tell you that. Many of us are diagnosed of having psychosis. It's not a very good thing to be looked upon. So what I would say, if you're looking for help, please try to get somebody who has, I know it's going to be difficult, but try to get somebody who has experienced an NDE, because one of the things that I came up against, and it had a profound negative effect on me, was I was dealing with people who really didn't understand what it is like to have such a profound spiritual transformative experience. There was an awful lot of, counter-transference and transference going on, because everybody has a fear of death, so I have found. And many people want to, this doesn't apply to everybody, but many in my medical profession were not really understanding about what was going on with me, but wanted to know what I'd seen. So it satisfied their own curiosity. And that's great. I understand that. But when you're there for help and you hand your power over to them, your trust, you can, in some cases, and particularly in my case, I was abused for that. And so, which is one of the reasons why I became a professional within this field, just to treat others who have had a verified cardiac arrest. It's like I'm not so much about an NDE. I nearly stepped in front of the bus. Remember, we spoke about that. Many do class that as an NDE, but I personally don't. I only work within a realm of cardiac arrest survivors, because I know that they've been certified as have flatlined, and that to me is very important. So there's a massive difference between I nearly stepped in front of a bus and I have flatlined. So there's different levels to this, and this is one of the things where I had learned early on in my career, my change of career, that it's very important to find somebody, if you can, who has experience in this field. Otherwise, you should be wary of the profound impacts you can have upon a mental health professional. Because they're just the same as us. The only difference is that they've got a different certificate on the wall behind them. But we all still have the same emotions. Many of us have been brought up with the same traits of thoughts, heaven and hell, and if you don't do well, you don't go to hell, you don't go to heaven. If you do bad, you go to hell. And this can have profound effects when you're sitting in front of a professional. So this is what I would say to survivors: seek us out, seek me out on the internet. Look for me. If you're a medical professional yourself, speak to me before you speak to us survivors of cardiac arrest trauma. It's massively important. There are so many out there who are suffering because of not ignorance from the medical profession, but just a kind of lack of understanding or lack of time to find out how it truly touches us. So I gave a talk, I gave an interview to the American Health Institute, and it's called The Gap of Care. And that is a fabulous read. There's 9 other participants within that. And we all tell about our experiences of meeting the medical profession and how we've been helped. So the American medical profession are way ahead of us here within the UK. We're only starting to wake up now because many of us are surviving cardiac arrests, and we're coming back with these themes of problems. And when you deal with as many people as I have, you start to see the themes. And that's what happened to me when I was at Pennsylvania at the conference there. There was over 400 people there, and when you have that amount of survivors, experiencers, you start to see themes very quickly. And you start to hear the same things, like, I couldn't get any help, or, nobody really wants to hear about the negative side of surviving. Everyone just wants to hear about how beautiful heaven was. And I get that, it is beautiful, but that doesn't help many of us who are traumatized, whether it's through wonderment or through what we have actually experienced within the ICU. So, this is another side which is very rarely spoken about. It's kind because of the attitude of, well, you should be grateful that you survived, Raymond. And it's like, so I've come across an awful lot of that. Oh my God, you've had 10 cardiac arrests. How are you still here? And it's like, no, stop. It's not what you think. So I have educated an awful lot of medical professionals. They have actually been quite shocked at what I've told them. It's like, well, we thought you'd be happy, Ray. We didn't understand, the impact that you leaving hospital upon your family, because you have to grieve the loss of. I never understood until 5 months ago. Somebody said, have you grieved the loss of old Raymond? No, I hadn't. And do you know what? It left me in a pool of tears. Because I hadn't, no one had taken that time to say, this is what you can expect. I'm not saying what will happen, but, may happen to you. So, I try to stay grounded in this, and it's very difficult because of my experiences and, being a seer and everything else. But medical professionals are not interested in me being a seer. They want validated working methodologies, whether it's psychodynamic, cognitive behavioral therapy, person-centered therapy. This is how they operate. They don't operate on, I've seen cancer on somebody. They're not interested in that. They might be fascinated, but it doesn't help them when they write their reports. So this is where I come from. I still have a huge seer spiritual side to me, and I do talk about that, and I do amazing work with that. But when I'm dealing with the medical profession, they're not interested in that. They need what their job tells them to do. And this is where Raymond O'Brien comes from. So, if you're a survivor, I can't say enough again, make sure who you are going to, counselor, psychotherapist, psychiatrist, that they have an understanding. And if they don't, keep looking, because you will hurt yourself. Things have been said to me, I've never forgotten. But said with the best intent, but has left me kind of like even more broken than I was when I went there. So I'm one of the lucky ones. I've been retrained. I've been able to get out there and help others. But many of us don't. Many of us are stuck within the incredulity of what happened to them, and that's a hard thing to shift. So this is where I come from. This is Raymond O'Brien's philosophy approach to what happened to him. And it's at odds with quite a few others. But one thing I can tell you is that I know it works, because I'm told it works, and that's enough for me. So so I'm very observant about how people should get help, but don't just talk to anyone. Make sure you speak to somebody who has been there, seen it, done it, if you can, because we're very rare. Somebody with my level of experience and qualifications I'm very rare, you know, to be in that profession, to be able to work in this profession, you know, because I'm talking about an event or describing my experience to a client, you know, so it can be massively triggering. So all of this, you have to be, you know, lots of survivors give talks, but what they don't realize is the impact that giving that talk will have upon them, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, you know, and sometimes it comes with enormous regret at some of the interviews that we've given. I know people who have been deeply upset about giving interviews and should never have done so, but it's just because of where their mind was at the time. We're like flowers. It's like, because we've been so traumatized, we'll always go to the light. And for some of us, that light can come in the form of attention of others who wants to know. And we think that that's a good thing for us. But more often than not, it's not good for us. It's a case of re-triggering us, and it keeps us in a set spot, you know, which is not good for us. It doesn't allow us to move with the experience that we've had. So, you know, again, this is, to a lot of people, they've never heard anyone talk like this before, because there's not many of us survivors who have this experience to give it out to the world, you know, and the saddest thing is the suicide rates of NDE survivors, you know, whether it's cardiac arrest, whether it's, you know, soldiers stepping on whatever landmines, all of that kind of stuff. You know, it's difficult to cope and they end up committing suicide. So this is the difference between getting it right and getting it wrong. And we're still getting it wrong because the suicide rates amongst us is still very high, and the divorce rate. So that tells me one thing, that the current working modalities are not working. You know, we're actually often brushed off as suffering psychosis, and it's really, really, really demeaning to the experience that we have gone through. You know, you cannot help but come back with a different set of life principles, ethics. It shatters the whole psyche. It shatters, you know, your beliefs, and these need to be nurtured to help us get back into society. You can't say, I just lay my hands on this person and they'll be okay. Sometimes, you know, some doctors would come up to me quietly and go, and then they'd become a normal doctor again. You know, so it's being able to, you have to have many coats, you know, for whatever situation you're in. And I am starting to teach that, because I'm starting, not because I'm in it for the money. All of my needs are being met. I don't need anything else. You know, I'm not after a Ferrari, a Porsche, or anything like that. My needs are being met. I've got food on the table, I've got a roof over my head, and I've got some beautiful friends. I don't need anything else. But I have an understanding of who I am. I am grounded. You know, I know who I am. I don't need to read a book to tell me about, you know, about an NDE. No, with the greatest respect, I don't dilute my knowledge. Why would I? You know, I've been at this for 61 years. So I don't like to blow my own trumpet, but I'm good at what I do. And that's why I've decided you need to teach others, Ray, who have kind of got at a roadblock. There's a huge hole, there's a gap of care here that is not being looked at. You know, but I'm still here. And for the time that I'm here, I'll do everything that I can to help others, but particularly the medical profession, because they'll be seeing more people than I would ever have the possibility to ever have seen. And so there's a lot of things coming with Raymond O'Brien next year to help others as a way that I have.
So you please let me know, and I think we can arrange another interview next year.
I would love that, AJ. I'd love that. I would love to come back and, you know, just to give you, like, you know, this is a progress report, really,
an update.
Yes.
So, well, I'm really glad you came. This was really a great experience. You are an exceptional person.
Thank you.
I would like to keep in touch and find out what you're going to do next year then. Okay.
You've got a good soul, AJ. I see it. So it would be lovely to keep in touch with you. Don't say that to everyone. Only the really good ones. So yeah, it's been beautiful experience talking to you. Thank you so much.